Welcome to section 4.3. We're going to do some more measuring. We're going to be measuring lengths using our imperial ruler again. So we're going to start on page 88, and you'll notice a couple of just working with numbers things, because those numbers will be helpful when we're reading the numbers off of an imperial ruler. The first question here talks about what different pairs of numbers multiply to 12. And the reason we're talking about 12 is because there are 12 inches in a foot. And we know that often we get things broken up into 12. So if you think about things that are multiplied to 12, the easiest thing is 12 times 1 is multiplied by 12. Some of you might have thought of 6 times 2, which also equals 12, or 3 times 4, which equals 12. If we're thinking of half of 12, well, we can imagine a sort of a chunk here that goes from 0 to 12, and halfway through that, of course, is 6. And we can see that. And we know that because 6 times 2 is 12. And then a quarter of 12. Well, if there and there is 12, and this is half of that is 6, and then half of this little chunk would be 3. And we would get that a quarter of 12 is 3. Or you could divide by 12 divided by 4 gets us 3. And then 3 quarters, well, again, there's 3 is 1 quarter, 2 quarters is 6, so another 3 halfway between 6 and 9, or 12, is 9. And 3 quarters of that is 9. 3a, what's the missing dimensions? So this is a rectangle. So if we have 4 feet on this side, that means that there must be 4 feet on this side. And remember, the 1 tick refers to feet. If it was 2 ticks, it'd be talking about inches. And the bottom is 6 feet, so that means the top is also 6 feet. And if we're calculating the perimeter, remember the perimeter is the outside edge of this shape. And so if we started here, we go 4 plus 6 plus 4 plus 6. So the perimeter just adds all of those lengths up. And 6 plus 4 is 10. And obviously another 6 plus 4 is 10. So that is 20 feet. They use the FT. We're using the 1 tick to be feet. The opposite of the question is here. It says it gives you that the perimeter is 36. Can you calculate the width? So this is a little bit more challenging. But what we do know is one measurement. If this is 10, then across from it must also be 10 in the rectangle. So we've already accounted for 10 and 10, which is 20 feet of the entire perimeter. So if we have accounted for that, what are we left with? Well, 36, the entire one, we've already included this 10 and 10 are 20. That means there's 16 feet left over. And then we're going to take that 16 feet and we have to use some of it here and some of it here. Well, they're even amounts, so we're going to take that 16 feet and divide it by 2, and we would get 8 feet. That means the width is going to be 8 feet wide. And now let's add it up. 10 and 10 is 20, plus 8 is 26, and 8 more is 36. Or sorry, 28 and then 36. Let's just check that again. So 10 plus 8 plus 10 plus 8 is indeed 36. So that's good. All right, what is the missing number for this one? Well, 19 is 12 plus. Well, how much more do we need to get to 19? So 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. That's 7 fingers I have up right now. So 7 of that. You can also do the math. 19 minus the 12 will get you the 7. What about 21 minus the 12? So that's 12 plus 9. Okay. 15 is 12 plus 3 more will get us that. And then, oops, that one came at the same time. 12 plus 6 is 18. Now, if we were converting feet to inches, then we got to remember this one big calculation, that 1 foot is 12 inches. So for each of these feet, if I'm going to inches, I know that I'm going to have to take all of them and multiply it by 12. So let's just help us out here. 2 feet then is 2 times 12, which is 24. And you get more and more comfortable with the multiplying by 12 because as you do more and more inches and feet. 3 times 12, 3 times 12 is 36. The way I think of that one is 3 times 10 is 30, and 3 times 2 is 6. Add those up and I get 36. 5 times 12 is 60. Again, there, 5 times 10 is 50. 5 times 2 is 10. And we get 60 in total. And then this one, I think we can do 10 times 12 is 120 inches. Okay, so that's just a little warm up with some math numbers and that sort of stuff, which will be helpful when we're going off and measuring lengths. All right, underneath this warm up on page 88, it has this little note, measuring with precision. Some measurements need to be more precise than others. The unit you round to depends on the distance being measured. When you're measuring a shorter distance, a small thing, you need to be as precise as possible. So this is, if you're measuring something like the lines that we're going to measure, you'll want to be down to like 1/16 of an inch to something really, really small. But if you're talking about measuring a big 2x4 and you need, 3¼ feet, you don't need to necessarily get down to the 1/16 of an inch when you're doing a big long 2x4. You might just go down to a quarter of an inch or an eighth of an inch or as close as you can. Remember, when you cut, the width of the blade is about an eighth of an inch or a 1/16 of an inch, depending on what kind of blade you have. So you can't even be that accurate as you're cutting. But when we're doing small measurements, you want to be as precise as possible. So that's what we're going to do when we move over to page 89. We're going to try and be as precise as possible. So let's just look at this. It says use a ruler in number 1, and then number 2, it says measure the same lines in number 1 to the nearest 1/16 of an inch. Well, I don't think I'm going to round at all. So I think what I'm going to do is just get rid of this little instruction, and I just want us to measure this. Let's just use a ruler and do the measurements, and we'll be precise on our first measurement instead of doing it twice. Okay, so we'll just write the measurements down here. So let's take our ruler that is in inches, and hopefully you have a ruler in inches at your house. This one is a sample one. Of course, on the screen, it's not going to actually match the inch that it is in real life, but you'll get the idea. So we're going to take our ruler then and put it underneath our line and be able to go off and measure as precise as possible. So I put the 0 right to the end of that. Oops, skipped on me there. There we go, that looks pretty good. And I see that this is over 2 inches. 1 inch is 2 inches. And the question is, how much is this? Well, I can see here is 2½ inches, right? There's 2, there's 3. This is 2½, and this is a half of a half. So that gets me to a quarter. So, and you could even count the 16ths if you wanted. 1, 2, 3, 4 16ths, which is the same as 1/4. But frankly, I don't even look at the 16ths. I've got there's 2½, and this obviously is half of a half, which is a quarter. So I'm going to say the first measurement is exactly 2¼ That's as precise. We don't need to go eighths or 16ths. That is very precise. It's a quarter. So why would I write it in eighths and 16ths? I'm going to write it in quarters. Okay, let's go to the next one. The next one is a little more precise. We're going to have to be really, really tight on this. You can see it goes down to one of the smallest ticks. And remember, the smallest ticks on our ruler is a 1/16. So this is going to be a bit more challenging. It's somewhere between 1 and 2, and we're going to have to count the 16ths. So I know that halfway is going to be 8/16. Let's confirm that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So there's 8. I'm past 8/16. I'm just going to keep counting up from 8, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. I think that's the 13th, 16th. So let's just keep counting. 13, 14, 15, 16, 16th. Yes. So there I am at 13/16. So this is 1 and 13/16. Wow, that one's a tough one. Okay, let's move down to C. Okay, this looks smaller than that. Okay. And again, it is somewhere between 1 and 2. You'll notice that it's more than a half, so it's more than 1½, and it's in one of these sort of medium length bars. So those medium length ones are not quite a quarter. Quarter is this one. It's not a half, it's not a quarter, and it's not as small as a 16th. So I think it's in between those, which is an eighth. So if I just double check here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, eighths. Yes, I'm talking about eighths, and you probably saw me count there. Again, I like to go halfway in eighths. So I should be able to say half of 8 is 4. So this is 4 eighths, and then just count one more eighth over to get 5 eighths. I can confirm that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes. So this is 1 and 5 eighths. And the last one then is, oh, it's very long. It goes almost to the end. Okay, so it's not quite 3 inches, but it comes very, very close to that. Let's just put that. So very, very close to 3 inches, and it is one sort of medium tick away. Well, I just did that in eighths, so this is almost all the way to the eighths line. It is 1/8 less. So if it's one less than 8, that's 7 eighths. So I think this is 7 eighths. 2 and 7 eighths. Again, I'm going to count from my eighths. There's 4 halfway there. 5, 6, 7. Okay, good. So this is 2 and 7 eighths. Okay, so you're going to need to do it just as best as you can on these measurements. I know it's challenging. I wish I was there to be able to help you with reading the ruler, but I know we've had some experience with reading this from last year. Okay, let's move on to now number 3. So number 3 is a really neat one. I like this. You've got a grid there, and if you take your ruler and actually lie it right down, you will see that each of these grids is a 1/4 inch. That's something that graph paper is often divided in as little 1/4 inches. So that's why it's a kind of a nice scale. It goes by 1/4 inches. And it says take a ruler, a straight edge. It can be a ruler if you want, but just to draw this. But we're going to use the grid to help us do this. So if each of these is 1/4 inch, how many of them is necessary to get to 1? Well, let's count them up. So there's the 0 spot. So if this is 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and there's 4/4. So 4 ticks, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 1 inch. And I can confirm that on my ruler. Yes, that's 1 inch. Okay, and then I'm not going to write out all the quarters because 1, 2, 3, 4, there's number 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 3. Looks like it probably goes up to 4, but that's enough for me. All right, so this is helpful, little guidelines to help us when we draw these. So the first one I'm going to do is red here. Let's just get my red line. And luckily I'm using the computer, so it'll draw a straight edge for me. You can just go off and do it. Right now, the length of my red line is about 1 inch, and it needs to be 2.5. So there's the 2, there's the 3, so halfway in between is going to go all the way to right about there. Let's look at that. Oh, I think that's just a little bit too big. There we go. There, 2.5 inches, right halfway between 2 and 3. So there's 2.5 inches. 3 3/4. Wow. Okay. So 3 3/4. So there's 3, and 1/4, 2/4, 3/4 is going to go almost all the way to the end, but not quite until the end. And there is 3 3/4. Okay. What about the next one? 2 1/4. So again, then there's 2 right there, and we're in quarter ticks. So it's just 1 square past the 2 line. So there's 2. Let's put it at the beginning. And I'm going to extend this to 1 square past the 2. And there's 2 1/4. And then 1 1/8. Oh, this is interesting. 1/8. Each of these ticks is a quarter. So what is 1/8? Well, 1/8 would be halfway between 0 and 1/4. So we're going to have to draw this one a half tick past. So it's already at 1, and I just need to go not all the way here. This would be 1 1/4, so I need about half of that. So I'm going to estimate that it's about there, maybe just a little bit less. There. that looks about right, as 1 1/8. Okay, so using this grid is really handy. In a couple of sections, we're going to be using a grid and graph paper to be doing some drawings. So this is a great little practice setting us up for that. That's number 3, but if you look right underneath, it's number 4. It says use a ruler to confirm this measurement. So we can just confirm this right on the ruler, 2.5, and you'll see there it is, exactly 2.5. So that's good. This one, well, my ruler actually isn't long enough to do this, but I can get 3 all the way up to there, and then I can take my ruler and just go the extra part, and there's there's 1, 2, 3/4 pass. So there's 3 3/4, 2 1/4. There it is, 2 1/4 pass. There's a half, so it's not quite a quarter. And then here's our eighths. So this would be good to measure because our scale didn't have eighths. And look at that. There is 1 1/8. Okay, so that's great. And then if I wanted to go 16ths, I need to get even smaller. But that's pretty good right there. All right, so there's number 3, and we've confirmed it with number 4. And now we're moving on to number 5. Without a ruler, draw a line that you think is 3 inches long. So you could look at the scale that we just had, this grid here, to give you an idea of how far 3 inches is. What I do when I'm estimating inches, I actually use my first 2 fingers. So I'm just going to put a little X at the beginning of where my line is, and you can imagine, use your 2 fingers. And if you take your 2 fingers and put it on a ruler, your first 2 fingers, you will see that it is approximately an inch. So look at that, that's about an inch. Okay, so you can use that and sort of map it out. So you could take, there's 1 inch, and then there's about 2 inches, and there's about 3 inches. And I'm going to estimate then that my X would be somewhere around there. So I'm estimating that that is my by 3 inches. Okay, now if I had a bunch of them, there's 1, 2, 3, you could see that. So let me draw a line between those 2 X's and see how I do. So there's my line, and let's actually measure as my estimate. Okay, so I'm going to take this, and you'll see that, oh, I'm pretty close. So it looks like I've drawn just a little bit less than 3 inches. That's a pretty good estimate. Okay, so you can check that on your fingers. I have pretty big fingers, so I only need 2 to make up an inch, but you can check it on your ruler. Maybe you've got very thin fingers, and maybe you'll use 3 to represent an inch. But I think most people, it's 2 fingers is about an inch wide. So if you're estimating 3 of them, you would put that down. Okay, so that gets us down, finishing number 5. Number 6 asks us to measure the dimensions of the classroom. Well, obviously from home we can't do that, so I'm just going to skip that one. And that is as far as we're going to go for 4.3. Okay, so we are not doing page 90 or 91. We are going to stop and finish 4.3 right there. So you're going to now go on and do your quiz. So again, you really can't be doing measurements on the quiz. So we're just going to do a little bit more practice of identifying the where it is. I'm going to use a 3-inch ruler now. The last quiz you did was a 2-inch ruler. And remember, your answers are going to look a little bit different. They're not going to look as nice as the ones that you see here. So for example, this one, 2, this is 2.5. This is halfway between 1/2 and 3. So I think this is 2 3/4. So when you see this written on the multiple choice screen, you're going to see an answer something like this: 2 space 3/4. That's the best way I can actually write 2 3/4. We can't quite get the nice graphics that you've seen in here. So just make that as a quick little warning when you go off and do your quiz. All right, so good luck with that, and we'll see you soon.